Hello and welcome to the Answered Yes podcast. My name is Jim Riley. This is, I don't know how many episodes I've done now, but I am in the Center Club here in Orange County, California, thanks to my friend Henry Park. Henry, thanks for having us here, buddy.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is a nice place. So you're a member at the Center Club.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, how did you find this place? Because it's pretty nice.
Oh, actually, I had a birthday party here for my daughter Audrey, and found the place right here. And they told me that if you're a member, you get a discount. So I ended up becoming a member, and then they have a really good social program here, where if you want to meet clients after work, and they have a lot much activities. So we just continue with the membership.
It's kind of like the who's who of Orange County come in here and do their deals. I just walked in the bar. Looks like there's some stuff going down over there.
Yeah, that's true.
We should go sell them a mortgage or something. Well, I know you mentioned that you found this place because you were going to have a party for your daughter. You are a big family man. We can follow along with keeping up with the parks, right?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, we do. I have a YouTube channel called Keeping Up with the Parks, and just did it kind of on a whim. But yeah, you can check me out there.
That's cool. And I know I've seen it on Instagram, and you do spend a lot of time with your family. I want to talk about your family time, but I know you from the mortgage business. You treated me real well a lot of years ago in the mortgage business, and you know a little bit about that, huh?
Yeah, this is for everyone who don't know. Jim Riley used to be the sales and beverage director over at Kettle One Vodka. So I ended up doing a loan for you, and then Bill, and president of Kettle One, and a lot of the guys at Kettle One. But yeah, you guys, and then from there, friendship kind of and a bond was created. And we've been hanging out since then. Well, gosh, what was like at least 10, 15 years ago?
It's been almost 15 years. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable to think how fast time has gone on. I knew you in a social setting, but I didn't realize what a kind and wonderful heart you had and how much you are willing to help other people.
Well, thank you. I don't know if that was always the case, but definitely in the last few years, I just kind of had a different change in mindset, and about paying it forward and helping people.
Yeah. Well, you did something special for me in the mortgage business and got me into really my first big home in Orange County, and I really appreciate that, and I'll never forget that. And I'm glad that our paths have connected again.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So what interests me the most, and I've seen over the last 10 to 15 years, your businesses develop and grow, and how many employees you have, and your family's grown too. But where did life begin for you? You grew up in a small household locally. Where did you grow up at?
Well, I was born in Guam, and my dad was in the military. My mom was a travel agent, and after I was born there in Guam for a year, then my parents moved to Hawaii, and then from Hawaii, that's where my brother was born. And my whole dad's side of the family lives in Hawaii. My mom's side all lived over here in California. So after about 5 years old, that's when we moved to Hawaiian Gardens.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, my parents at the time, they thought it was like Hawaii, right? Those people who don't know where Hawaiian Gardens is, it's a little bit rough, it's a poor neighborhood. But yeah, I grew up in a one-bedroom apartment all the way until I was 14 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you had already traveled more than most people had in their whole lifetime from the country where you were born to Hawaii and back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, I mean, my dad. I mean, he grew up in Korea, and just was struggling and trying to make ends meet. And he started off as a cashier at a gas station, making $3.25 an hour.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was just really tough. And my mom was working part time at a Japanese restaurant, and so between the two of them, they really didn't make much money. But obviously they tried their best to try to give me and my brother a better life.
Yeah. So you grew up with a brother, your mom and dad, in a one-bedroom apartment in Hawaiian Gardens.
Yes, pretty
Wow.
much.
What was that like? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was tough. I mean, my parents lived in the bedroom. Me and my brother lived in the living room, and we, and yeah, just growing up. Money was always something, because when you come from having nothing, you're always looking to basically, having nothing, you want everything, right?
Yeah.
So growing up, my dad, he had all these stories of, what, I'm going to save up one day, we're going to buy a big house, we're going to make a lot of money, or I'm going to make a lot of money, I'm going to take you on vacation, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. So me and my brother, we kind of went along with that, and that was the whole thing as far as money was concerned.
Yeah. What values did you learn in that household? Because I know that now that you have kids, there's certainly things that you learned growing up that you probably carried on a little bit.
Okay, so you know what? Let me actually tell you. Do you have time for a story?
I do have a time for a story. I'm hoping to get one today.
All right, so here's what it is, right? So and this is, at least, I don't know if this is anyone else's story, but this was my story, right? So growing up, didn't have a lot of money, right? And so I was always pretending I had money, or kids, you always get made fun of. But a lot of my friends growing up, they didn't have any money either, right? So my parents, they would always be telling me a story. Henry, you don't understand. Your grandfather was really rich in Korea. There's this big mountain that he owned half of the mountain, and your grandfather's brother owned like a big university, and he paid for half of that university. He's the third richest taxpayer, right? And then the other story. My last name is Park, right? So they're like, Henry, we have in Korean, Park, Lee, Choi. So these are all like the last names, right? Now, in your last name is Park, and you're what we call Milyang Park. So a couple thousand years ago, your great grandfather came from a family of kings, right?
Okay.
So I was just like, oh wow, but then I was like, wait a second, but Mom, isn't the grandfather that I knew grew up that I know of was from Koreatown and had Kim Cleaner, right? And she goes, oh no, that's after he lost it all, So growing up, I always had like a chip on my shoulder and thinking, you know what, you guys don't know. So I would always tell my friends, you know what, you guys don't know what you're talking about. I actually come from a family of kings, not knowing till 20 years later that everyone with the last name Park is Minyang Park. So I guess if I'm a king, I guess everyone's came from a family of kings, right? So and so it was from an early age that I had this this whole thing about a different kind of relationship with money, right? So
Yeah.
so I wanted to kind of grow up. I wanted to make a lot of money. I wanted to be rich, and my whole thing was because I wanted to kind of plant that flagpole in the ground and said, hey, you know what? I did it. I made it for our family, and we did come from family kings. Blah 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 blah, and and then so from that, just kind of give you another little story about my dad. So I went to a school called Whitney High School, but
Okay.
that school's in Cerritos, and you need to take a special test to get there, right?
Yeah.
And growing up, my parents didn't have any money to tutor. They didn't have any money to help me as far as I had to basically study on my own, right? But my dad did tell me something. He goes, Henry, you know what? If you make it to Whitney High School, right, then I'm gonna buy you the best steak, right? And I said, really? And he goes, yeah, Henry, you have no idea how good this the steak place I want to take you to, right?
Yeah.
So, of course, I'm like, I studied my butt off that summer. I went ahead and, did super workbook and this and that. And anyways, to make a long story short, I ended up passing the test. And then I knew that going into 7th grade, I was going to go to Whitney, right?
Yeah.
So then my dad, he was really proud of me. And he goes, Henry, you know what? Now that you pass the test and you go into Whitney, I'm gonna take you to the place. So I said okay. So I hop in my dad's van. He takes me to this restaurant. At the time I didn't even know difference between ribeye, filet mignon, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so I'm cutting into the steak, and then he's like, "Oh, Henry, does it taste good?" And I'm eating, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, this is awesome." And he goes, "Oh, you always have to have an A1 when you're eating good steak, And so I'm like, I didn't even know what that was. I'm like, okay. And anyway, so I went back, to Aloha Elementary, which is where I went to elementary school. And all my friends were like, "Oh, hey, so what happened? Did your dad finally take you to that steak place?" And I remember this guy, his name was Andy Kyle. We're in the same grade.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh yeah." And then I go, "But you know what? You're never probably gonna be there." And da 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 da. But it's the most awesome steak I've ever had. And they're like, What's the name of it?" And I'm like, "Well, you haven't heard of it, but I'll tell you. It's called Black Angus." And they're like, "Oh my God, Black Angus, right?" And so they just started making fun of me, and I was like, "Shut up."
Yeah.
And then I hit Andy. in the lip. But you know what? I didn't. Sometimes when you come from nothing and you come from being so poor, you don't realize till way later on, right? How big the world is.
Yeah.
So 20 years later, I go back and I tell my dad, "Hey, Dad, you know what? I'm gonna take you out for dinner, da 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 da." Da." And my dad's like, "Okay, you know what? Where are you taking me?" And I said, "Dad, don't worry about it. Just get in the car and we're going, right?" So I think I was like 20 years old, 21 years old. I ended up taking him to Mastro's, right,
Yeah.
steakhouse, and I'm like, "Dad, what do you think?" And then he just kept saying, "Oh, it's okay. It's not it's like same like Black Angus."
Uh,
I said, "No, it's not that. This is the dry aged beef, blah blah blah." Right? And I remember when the bill came out, and he said, "Let me see." I said, "No, don't. I got you, right?" And I think he got a glimpse of the bill, and he's like, "Oh, Henry, you pendejo, you should just went to
yeah.
Black Angus, right?" And the thing is, the funny story is from that story is, even from like let's say, he would always tell me, "Henry, you know where's the best buffet?" I'm thinking Bacchanal at Caesar Palace, or
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he's like, "No, hometown buffet, right?" And I'm like, "Hometown buffet? Oh hell no, right?" But the thing is all my dad's places that he mentioned, from hometown buffet to Black Angus and this Korean restaurant which is down the street, what I noticed was they were all within 5 minutes of where my parents lived in Cyprus.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because my dad hated to drive, right?
Yeah.
And so for me growing up like that, I was thinking, okay, you know what? When I get older, right, I'm going to show my dad what the best is, right? Ferrari, Lamborghini, Newport Beach, caviar, and that's where a part of where my life took a whole different spin.
Yeah.
Was my goal, and is I was totally only money motivated, and the only thing was I had this thing, and I gotta show my dad, and I gotta show my parents to make them proud of me by trying to make as much of millions of billions of dollars as I could.
Yeah, I want to talk about that in a little bit, but I want to go back to your upbringing because what I find is fascinating that I'm hearing from you is your parents gave you confidence to be a better person, to aspire for more when they gave you the description of your last name and what that meant, right?
Right.
It comes from kings, and when your dad gave you the confidence to educate yourself and get into that school, he's going to take you to the best steak. To me, I think that shows a lot about the type of parents you had because they wanted to make you feel important and strive to do more in your life. And it seems like it worked to a degree.
It did, and let me tell you what it is I didn't know this until later on in life, and now I'm 44 years old, right? But when you're young, when you're 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 15 years old, 20 years old, you don't understand what the lessons that your parents try to give you, right? So
Yeah.
one of the things, my dad, he was, remember I told you he started off as a cashier at a gas station.
Hmm.
He eventually went to night school, went to Cypress College, became an ASC certified mechanic, and then eventually saved up enough money and then opened up a gas station. So he ended up owning a Shell gas station, right? So and it was right here in Norwalk, right off of Firestone and Studebaker. So, but the funny thing is, and this is the funny thing, a story about my dad, is that he always liked Toyotas, right? And then I asked my dad, well, why? He goes, oh, the parts are cheap to fix, and then they're really built well, and then so I told my dad, well, I'm gonna buy a Mercedes when I get older, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, don't buy a European car, too expensive to fix, blah blah blah, and and he goes, Audi? I said, yeah. He goes, you know what they say? I said, no. Ouch. Right? And I'm like, Dad, then why do all the people who are rich, have Mercedes, right? And he goes, you know what? They don't know. You think that just have a nice car mean that person's a good person. So he would always constantly bring me back to that.
Yeah.
And one of the things about my dad, which was find fascinating to me, is because I grew up working at my dad's gas station. And my dad would be like, so I'd have he'd have his customers come in. Hey, Mr. Park, I've got this transmission, blew out, or I want to get it fixed. And I would see my dad, and sometimes he'd be like, no, he refuses to fix it. He goes, why don't you go and buy a Toyota, right? And they're like, no, well, this is in the family, in our family, and we won't want you to fix it. And my dad sometimes would refuse to fix it because he's saying that it's not worth the Kelly Blue Book, right?
Uh-huh.
And I would pull later on when my dad's I pull him to the side. I'm like, Dad, but if they're offering to have you fix it, they're paying you for it, right? Why don't you fix it, right? And if you have everyone go buy Toyotas, where are you going to get your customers, right? And I just remember he just grabbed my ear real tight and just boxed it, and he's like, listen, I never taught you to be like that, right? And I was like crying, oh, right, and I was like that, and and I didn't realize those little moments, that he was actually teaching me something, And one of the things that I appreciate about my dad is he was probably one of the most honest men that I can ever, those in this planet. One of the most honest people that I honestly can say that I was that I knew. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
it seems like he was really teaching you some values there about integrity and how he felt about charging people to
Yeah.
work on vehicles he didn't believe in, basically.
Exactly, exactly. I remember this one other story. This last story is I remember driving down the 405, and my dad was in this van. And growing up, my dad always liked to buy junky cars. I call them junky cars, right? And then he would fix them up, and then he would drive them for a while, and then he would sell them, right?
Hmm.
So growing up, my dad had this bright orange and white van, right? And he would take me to school, right? And I was always so embarrassed. I was like, oh man, because remember I told you I went to Whitney High School, right?
Yeah.
So starting from seventh grade, I went to Whitney, which was in Cerritos, and there were a bunch of other rich kids, Indian, Chinese, Korean, and their parents are driving them in BMWs and Mercedes, and my dad has this old the dilapidated van. So I had him like I was always so embarrassed, and he wanted to drop me off right in the front of the school, right? And I was just like, oh man, and I was always embarrassed. But the thing is, this one time, I remember we were just driving down the 405, and my dad was, I don't know where we were going. I think we were going to Fedco or something. But anyways, there was just happened to be a Rolls Royce that had passed by us, right?
Hmm.
And I told my dad, I said, hey dad, I said, take a look at that car. I said, you know what? Your son's gonna get that one day, right? And then he goes, no, no, no. He goes, why are you gonna spend the same money as a house on the car, right? And he's just trying to give me another lecture. I'm like, Dad, I don't want to hear it, right? And he go, okay, what is it about this car? This car's not a good car. And he said, no, Henry. It's not the car. He goes, it's the driver. I said, what do you mean? The guy's a bad guy now? He goes, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you don't know what is going on in his mind. And I'm like, what do you mean? What's going on in his mind? He have a tax problem. This guy may be cheating on his wife, and
Yeah.
he's talking about all these crazy problems. He goes, sometimes in life it's easy to maybe keep your life simple, right? And and growing up, I had a real resentment for that because I was thinking, you know what, Dad, maybe it's because you didn't you didn't have the balls to go out there and claim what's yours. So I'm gonna do that for you. You know what I mean? So growing up, I had this tension, especially when it comes to making money because I wanted to value the things that I felt that society per se says deems you as successful. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And it was until, like I said, as I got older, that I realized that he was actually right. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
You've had a lot of time to reflect on that the last few years. I know we'll save it for another show. We can talk about your career highlights, when you started getting into the mortgage business. But just
Sure.
for today's purposes, you've had some time to reflect back on the lessons that your dad taught you. We know from your website that your dad passed away. Changed your life, didn't it?
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it totally changed my life. You see, once you have a parent that passes on, right? And the funny thing is, for me, prior to my dad dying, right? I never knew anyone that had cancer, and I know that people say, "Oh, that's impossible." And hear me out. Here's what I mean, right? I always knew someone who had cancer, but it was, oh, your neighbor's cousin sister has breast cancer. Like, oh, great, but I didn't really know that person, right?
Yeah.
All my aunts and uncles were alive. My parents were alive. My so growing up, like I said, I didn't know someone very close to me that had that, and like you said, once you lose a loved one to that, your sense of mortality, it now becomes finite, right? So that was the thing for me because prior to that, you always think, I mean, I know it's stupid or foolish to think that you can live forever, but you think that, hey, the end is very, very, very far away.
Yeah.
And it's not until, like I said, you have something like that happen to you that you realize that no, it's actually maybe only 25 years away.
Yeah. What lessons are you teaching your kids right now after your dad passed and what you're doing in your own life?
Well, okay. So there's a funny story that my dad always told me. Right, he used to always say, "Henry, come over here," and I'm like, "What's that?" And he said, "You see this grease in your daddy's finger, right?"
Hmm.
And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Your daddy didn't. In Korean is appa. Appa is Korean, right? Korean for dad." He goes, "Your appa didn't go to college, so I want you to study real good, and I want you to be a doctor,
Uh-huh.
right? So of course, now me growing up, I'm like, hey, so I have my oldest daughter's name is Katie, so I'm like, hey, Katie, all right, come here. Your appa, he didn't study that well, so became mortgage banker. So I want you to be a doctor. So me and my wife, we put our kids to private school and all that, but we're dead set on having our daughter go to college to be a doctor. Yeah, so that was the funny thing, and the funny thing is, it's again, and then nothing bad to say about mortgage, but for me, I had no interest in being a doctor, and the reason why was because my felt like you're putting in all these crazy hours, you're gonna have to pay off all these student loans, and I wanted to make money, and I wanted
Yeah.
to make a lot of money because I wanted to show my dad that, hey, you know what, you're wrong, I was right, and I did it for the family. I did not knowing that the reason why my dad wanted me to be a doctor was to help people,
Yeah.
right? And that's really what it was all about. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah, it's him fixing those dilapidated cars. I didn't realize that later on it was because his way of giving back and helping people out.
Yeah. Imagine that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So funny thing is when my dad told me, Henry, I want you to buy a Toyota. So out of protest, I went ahead and bought a Toyota, and I still have that car down to this day. It's a '97 Toyota Supra.
Yeah.
Right? So I bought that Supra. I came and honked the horn, and I said, "Hey, Dad, here's a Toyota." And he goes, "Oh, you been down." He goes, "I told you Toyota, like not the sports car." I said, "Well, what's wrong with the sports car?" He goes, "Parts are expensive." Right? So I said, "Okay, so Dad, what kind of car did you want me to drive?" And he told me, I don't know, maybe a Toyota Camry. Right? I was like, Camry, Dad. I'm not gonna get any chicks that are driving a Toyota Camry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the
I'm,
thing.
I'm pretty sure I saw you driving around in a van one day.
Actually, that's funny. That's funny that you did tell me that. I have 4 kids now, right?
Yeah.
And so having 4 kids, it's sometimes not practical to, because you need a lot of space, right? So I was telling my wife, this is prior to my dad dying. So we were looking, we were dead set on not buying a minivan, right? And so we end up with a GL 550 Mercedes, right? But as you drive around with it, and the kids getting in and out, throwing stuff in the car, now, what else I bought? I bought a Toyota Sienna, right? Going back to Toyota, right?
Yeah.
And we drive that thing more than we drive. I think the GL doesn't even start the GL 550 because I haven't driven it so long with the battery. And you probably replace the battery, but yeah, I mean that Toyota Sienna has got 80, put 87 octane. You spend $40 to fill it up. I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So again, it's like, well, what's more important to you? You know what I mean? That those things I think change as time changes. You know what I mean? As you get older.
Yeah. Let's wrap this show up a little bit with what's important to you now. I understand through the passing of your father that you wanted to spend more time with your family and show them things that they haven't seen. Could you tell us a little bit about that as we kind of close this thing down?
Tell you about what now?
Yeah, just talk about you're keeping up with the parks and your travel.
Okay.
Your travel plans these last year.
Oh well, prior to prior to my dad passing, I haven't been anywhere. I just probably went to Mexico, Tijuana, or Rosarito one time or 2 times.
Mm-hmm.
I think I went to Canada once, to Niagara Falls, but that was just real quick on the other side of the border. But I never went anywhere.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until later on, like I said, it's once that tragic event happened. I've been to so many different countries. I went to Peru. I went to Machu Picchu. I went to Japan. I just Australia. Went to swim at the Great Barrier Reef, and I got to do a lot of cool stuff. And like I said, with my kids. You can always find my story on the website. We have a website, keepingupwiththeparks.com.
Yeah.
But what I always try to tell people is before I've got a bunch of little episodes that are like 2 minutes long. But before you watch any episodes, what I want you to do is I want you to go to the website, click menu, then go to our story, and I want you to read my story first, because then I think it'll give you more of an insight. Well, you read my story.
Well,
right?
I was just about ready to warn my listeners because I did read your story. And I was in I was in a Starbucks actually, and you told me, like, call me after you read my story that I wrote. And I'm in Starbucks, like, in tears reading your story, and it was so impactful.
Oh wow!
And I was just thrilled that the reason why we were going to talk later that day was the opportunity to work together. And knowing your story and the background by reading that really meant a lot to me. And I think that your learnings through life and being able to put that down on paper and now live that is pretty phenomenal and special at the same time.
Well, yeah, thank you. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it was just that keeping up with the parks thing. Like I said, once you read the story, you'll understand. But it was just something that I just put together, just so I can have at least, at the worst case scenario, memories for my kids. And but it would just give me an excuse for me to kind of inspire myself to travel. I want to go and see see everywhere. I want to see a bunch of different countries. I have it a goal. One of my things on my bucket list is to see every country in the whole world. But I think even with my kids, I mean, like when you go through traveling, you get to try out new foods, you get to see how other people live, different cultures, and I think that also makes a big difference. You know what I mean? Especially with my kids, it's able to see how other people live and seeing all that stuff.
Yeah, I think it's pretty amazing that you're having an opportunity to give back to your kids in a way that maybe they might not be able to do later on in life, and that's through travel and experience and education. And I love that the foundation of all that is thinking about your father and things that you weren't able to do with him, and learning how important those things are to spend time with your kids. I know you're wildly successful in your business. You own several companies, and we're going to have an entire show on the companies that you've started and ran and have been successful in, predominantly in the mortgage business, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, but I've done everything from being a mortgage bond trader, mortgage escrow. Just real estate. A lot of it's real estate related, but once you start making money, then you start venturing into other things. But like I said, I mean, now I'm more interested in what I call passion projects, right?
Yeah.
Thankfully, luckily, and I thank God all the time, is that I got I feel like I got a second lease on life, right? So not many people are able to do that, or like my dad. If you read my story, is sometimes it's too late. You finally figured things out, and now you're on your deathbed, or you're too old, you can't move, you can't walk around, and so for me, not saying that, I mean, I'm not a spring chicken anymore, but at the same time, I barely had kids, and that was the other thing for me. The fact that, I am about 7, 8 years older than my wife. We delayed having kids because I wanted to have everything first, right? I wanted to have the house in Newport. I needed to have the Mercedes. I needed to have this. I needed to make sure everything was in place. So, and Jim, you're kind of like me too. I know your daughters are really young, but yeah, we're old. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm 44. You're close to 50 years old, and for me, the reason why I delayed those things was because I thought that by delaying it, having the perfect life, and if I can go back again, I think I would have had my kids 20 years ago, because now realizing there is no perfect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of my memories I had was when I didn't have money. You know what I mean? Not to say that having money, is the root of all evil. That's not true either. But what I'm saying is things didn't need to be the way that I needed them to be. You know what I mean? I could have, like I said, easily, now in retrospect, had kids 20 years ago, and maybe right now it would be an empty nester.
Yeah.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah. I often think about that, because if we had our kids earlier, we might be grandparents right now, or like you said, empty nesters, traveling the world, enjoying our spouses. I often do think there's just not enough time in your life when you start focusing on priorities like your kids and the joys of having a family and what that brings. I see a lot of your videos. You guys are cooking in the kitchen together. You're sharing meals. You're sharing laughs. You're at the fair, eating crazy foods. And I hope more people capture that earlier on in life. And what you just said, there's no perfect time to do some of these things.
Correct. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there isn't. You know what I mean? Not to say, and right now, I mean, thank God, luckily I have the resources, right? So one thing I could tell your listeners is that if you're going to give any gift, give the gift of yourself, right? I see a lot of CEOs, what they'll do is they feel really bad, so they'll, give their kids, amazing Christmas gifts or this or that. But you know what? Your kids don't want the toys. You mean what they want is you. You know what I mean? So if you can give them your time, right, and give them your attention, I mean, that I think is a better gift than anything. And I had to kind of liken it, and I put it in a mindset, and this is what I mean by that is, I have a lot of successful friends that are really rich too, right? And I tell them, I said, hey. Quit being a cheap bastard. And they're like, well, what are you talking about? I said, what would you give your daughter or your son, right? Henry, I'll give that, and I'll give them anything, right? I said, okay. Well, you gave them a $3,000 Christmas gift. Why don't you give them an $80,000 Christmas gift? Henry, what do you mean $80,000? Well, how much is your time worth? Well, because they would rationalize, right? Oh, you
Yeah.
don't understand. I had to do this big deal. If I didn't do it, da da da. Well, how much did that deal, right? Instead of spending time watching your daughter play soccer or whatever, how much money would you have made on that deal? Oh, I would have made 50 grand. All right. Well, guess what? If you foregone that extra project and now you spend time with your kid, well, now you got a 50. Now you gave her that $50,000 gift of your time.
Yeah.
And this is that. Once my friend told me that, I actually had to reprogram my mind too, and I was always justifying. Oh, you know what? It's okay. They're gonna understand. If I wasn't there at this meeting, then I wouldn't have got that deal, and I wouldn't have had that relationship, and I wouldn't have signed up that extra, branch to it, make me that extra money. And now that I realize it, I just now equate. Right. Sometimes for me, I look at it as time as money. Right. So what I'm saying is buy that time by making that investment in your kids, and then you will make that time. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. People are gonna focus and spend their time on what they feel is what's more valuable to them. Believe it or not, it's true. So you can justify it and quantify it all you want, but if you know. And you know what I realized, right? Because I have employees of mine that says, "Oh, Henry, that's easy for you to say, right? You got a lot of money." No, it's actually harder. You know what I told one of my guys? I said, "Hey, look, what do you think is easier, right? Waking up and being flat broke and eating Lucky Charms, right? Or waking up with ocean view, right?
Yeah.
With enough money in the bank to last you without having to work for the next 10 years. Well, what do you think is harder to do, right? Because I've been blessed with being broke and having money, right? And it's simply not true, right? You can just if you want to make money, you can just keep going and going and going and going and going. And even if you're worth 100 million, you can look at people who are billionaires and say, well, what about him? And you can just work yourself to death,
Yeah.
right? And so like I said, it's not about enough. It's about are you feeling fulfilled and content in your life?
Yeah.
Right? And that's something I had to learn to do.
I practice something every morning. I learned from David Meltzer, who's an Irvine guy from Sports One Marketing. He talks about when you wake up in the morning, writing down a list of all the things that you have more than enough of and living in a state of more than enough, because you'll realize, like you said, the guy waking up in a one-bedroom apartment eating Lucky Charms, he might have more than enough based on what his desires and dreams are, because sometimes, like you said, it's never enough, right? There's
That's
never
right.
enough money. It's a good perspective. I appreciate you sharing that. So, well, I guess with that, let's leave on that note, because I think that's an important note to leave on.
Sure.
Also, the gift of time. If anybody could pick up something, is giving the gift of time to their family, their kids, even their friends and relatives, and even to others, in the give back scenario. So I think the gift of time is really an important statement to make.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Henry, appreciate you being on the show
No,
today.
thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I love it.
I know you've got a lot of things in the works. If you're looking to find out more about Henry, you can look up Keeping Up with the Parks, right? That's a website, but they also have an Instagram, Keeping Up with the Parks. And then you have Henry Park 74 on Instagram and Twitter, and as well as you have a Facebook account. And I know that you're doing some wonderful things. You're going to be doing some public speaking down the road and talking about being successful in that balance in life. And I think a lot of people can learn from what you've gone through, and not only just your success, but kind of where your philosophy is now in life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it'll be interesting. This is a new thing I'm going into, but with your help, hopefully, you know what I mean. It's gonna be okay. But I want to change. If I can even change just one life, right? Just like how my dad changed my life, I think it'll be all worth it.
Well, it'll be fun to follow along. We'll highlight those actions when we see them come along our way, and we really appreciate you being on here. So thank you.
All right, thank you.